it's going to be offensive or defensive line. I'm confident in that. It's going to upset people. And what's really going to upset people is that Chase and Pitts, it's looking like they're going to be there at 6, both of them. So the Eagles could have had their choice if that happens. And people are going to be really upset about that.
Let's switch over to the gridiron and talk about the NFL and the Philadelphia Eagles with Johnny Mack right now. Follow John on Twitter at JFMcMullen, PhillyVoice.com, SI.com. Extending the play on Saturdays, Birds 365, coming to you soon next week. Johnny Mack, how we doing, man?
Doing well. Trying to get through these pro days, but it could be worse. Justin Fields Day today, so that was exciting.
I mean, once again, John, some of the tweets I saw.
He rolled out to his left and evidently see the greatest pass in recorded history.
I mean, come on. I saw a tweet from Ryan Clark, who, Steeler great. I respect his opinion. Obviously, played the game at the highest level, knows what he's talking about. He tweeted something out like Fields just won the Super Bowl today. It's ridiculous.
Ryan Day talked after the pro day as well about what a breathtaking pass it was, which I'm sure it was when you're there. I mean, when you can throw the football that far, it's impressive to begin with. But, didn't we know that? I don't know. And he ran very well, 4.4. Didn't we know that? Couldn't you tell he was really fast? Look, I love the NFL. It's what I get paid to do, to cover the sport. But I got to tell you, this draft cycle every year at this point, it just gets mind-numbing. I mean, everybody's great. Everybody's the greatest ever. And we all know there's, I forget the name of it, but there's that, I've always made this comparison. There's a chemical that women secrete when they get pregnant that makes them forget, so they might want to get pregnant again. And it's like that way in the NFL draft. It's like you hear every year, everybody's great, everybody's great, everybody's great. Then you get to the games, and, Eagles fans can be the first in line. Was Jalen Reagor great? Was, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside great? All these great players don't turn out to be great, and everybody forgets about it. And they're exactly where they were the next year, and they'll be this way next year as well.
I mean, what if he overthrew that pass? What if he didn't complete one pass today? What is he not getting drafted? And because he looked good a little bit,
it's funny you say that, because Mac Jones also had a pro day today, and he overthrew a couple guys, and people were making out like it was a disaster. I mean, should you miss when in air? No. But, I mean, look, if somebody's interested in Mac Jones, they're looking at the film, they like the way he processes, they like the way he plays. No, it's not going to change anybody's mind.
All right, so, just anything you want to add to the Mac Jones pro day and any other, news surrounding prospects?
Now, my only thing is on the Mac Jones pro day, this was Alabama's second pro day. Think about that. They're so good, they have to have two different pro days. Trevor Lawrence had his own pro day. So Clemson technically had two pro days as well, but that was more injury related. He was going to have the shoulder surgery, and they wanted him to be able to throw. Really, Urban Meyer set it up for whatever reason. But, Alabama's just so stinking good. They can't fit them all in one day, so they have to have two pro days. Which, by the way, we talk about breaking up monopolies and big tech in this country, and we might want to break up Alabama. The monopoly.
I agree. They're taking all of our money. We're bankrupt. They own all the property. It's ridiculous.
They're too good. It's no fun. You and I have had that discussion. College football is no fun, man.
No.
You know, when I see both sides of the coin. I mean, I do think there is something to greatness and to see dynasties and things like that. But, you know, there's both sides of the coin, and it gets boring after a while. You know, nobody's competing outside of Clemson and Ohio State, and, you know, that's basically it. Maybe you get an up year from LSU or another SEC team, but, I mean, yeah, break them up.
I mean, just to add on to that conversation for another couple minutes, look at Gonzaga for men's hoops. They're playing right now. I mean, undefeated this year. Last year they were 31-2, 33-4 the year prior, 32-5 the year prior, 37-2 the year prior. They don't have a national title to show for it. If the format was like college football, maybe we would be looking at them the same way we look at Alabama. So the format does impact this.
Yeah, I mean, it is. That's a hard conversation because, I mean, football is a much more obviously difficult sport to have. Obviously, you can't have 64 teams and whittle it down. I mean, it's just too physical. It's just everybody be dropping like flies. And then, you know, I guess in theory you could back it up and say, well, let's go with the top 64 teams and play a regular season and whittle it down that way. But, yeah, it's just not feasible is what I'm trying to say in football. So, you know, that's the one thing the basketball tournament has for it. And I've always said, I mean, one and done, and there's the opportunity for upsets more likely than not than other sports because on you know, if you have a great day and the other team plays maybe their C or D game, you have those phenomenal finishes and those so-called Cinderellas, which I tell you all the time, Cinderella won. So if you don't win the whole thing, you're not Cinderella, technically. But nobody wants to hear that. And, you know, I don't know how if Central Florida plays, you know, they were undefeated, kind of declared themselves the national championships because they weren't involved. And I actually applauded them for doing it the year they did it. But let's be honest, if they had to play Alabama, they're getting boat raced.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They're not even on the same level, like completely different leagues. So I'm with you. And I don't know what the answer is for college football. As you said, you and I have talked about that plenty. Always an interesting conversation, though. So, all right, a couple other news and headlines for the NFL. The confirmation of the new 18-week schedule. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, 17 games over 18 weeks. So it's interesting. They just essentially pushed back the season a week. So the Super Bowl is going to go, I think it's February 13th, 12th or 13th. I don't have it in front of me. But so pushed back a little bit. And this was sort of baked into the CBA that the NFL, there was this, what they called a media kicker, that when the new television deals came in, they had the opportunity to increase the schedule to 17 games. And if they did that, the players in turn would get a kicker in their gross revenue. And the NFL felt comfortable because they got so much money in the new TV deal. So the players get 48%, a little bit more. Everybody in theory is happy until guys start, you know, falling like flies and get injured. And you're going to have another game to get through. So we just talked about football in general and how physical it is. And they keep going and going and going. And I don't know. I you know, they cut the preseason back to 3 games. I've already advocated cut the preseason out, maybe that would help a little bit and play 17 games. I mean, totally out. I mean, 0 games. And just let them practice or have joint practices or however each individual team wants to do it. I don't think you need preseason games. But there's always unintended consequences. I've had that conversation with our friend Colin Thompson, who's, on the Carolina Panthers. And, those games are important for guys on the back ends of the roster trying to make teams. And maybe that would affect their opportunities, which I do see some of that. But in a lot of ways, I've talked to enough coaches over the years. I think they value practice more anyway. I really do. And certainly in
and they don't practice
where they can script what they want to work on instead of, if you think about it, you're playing sort of dress up for a real game. And if you do want to work on something, say red zone work, or you're struggling, and you have to hope that comes up in the game. Whereas if you're having a joint practice, you can get together with the other coach and say, look, we have to work on red zone, and you get more work accomplished. That's kind of how coaches have phrased it to me.
They don't practice, John, and I agree with you. They value practice more than the preseason games, but this is part of the problem to me, and I kind of shake my head at them, extending it another week, another game for the regular season, and they only cut it down preseason from 4 to 3. And, it's a longer season, and these guys aren't practicing. I mean, don't you think the product is going to suffer and injuries are going to go up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has, and other people say it hasn't. I know. I mean, J.C. Tretter's the president of the NFLPA. He claims that the product's as good as it's ever been. I look at him cross-eyed when he says that, but, I mean, that's what the players are trying to sell. I think the athletes, we've kind of had this discussion with the NBA. I think the athletes are better than they've ever been. Or I don't think the game is better than it's ever been. And for the exact reason you just said, because of the lack of practice now. It's common sense. I mean, what do you do to get better in anything in life? Repetition, repetition, repetition. If you don't do it, you're not going to be as good at it. It's just as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, the product, you can make an argument that it's better because, like you said, John, the athletes are at an all-time high as far as nutrition and performance and training. And, so they've evolved with everything else. So the modern-day athlete is better, and the rules are tailored to the superstar, to the quarterback, to the offense. But as far as the health and safety of the players and as far as actual practice to get the team better, that's not happening. So everything is taking a hit. So it kind of can be disguised a little bit. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, no question. I think, and I always bring this up. I mean, today it's, everybody does the same thing: spread the field, RPO, blah blah, and it's like, for a generation that I guess grew up with that, that's what they know. So it looks fine to them. But if you do go back to the Bill Walsh era and the West Coast offense and all these intricate plays, it's not as aesthetic. It's just not. And you can't practice to be like those old 49ers teams. So coaches have rightfully shifted in other directions to make things more simple, simplify things, dumb things down. They don't dumb things down necessarily because they want to, because they have to, because they don't have as much time with the players as they used to. So, I mean, it depends how you look at it. And again, we've had this discussion in both sports, and I would bring in baseball as well. I don't know as much about hockey, but I would guess it's the same way there as well. It's a natural occurring thing because there's less practice, and less practice, I'm sorry, is going to mean players aren't as fundamentally sound. They aren't as technique sound. So you're going to have spectacular plays. You're always going to have spectacular plays by spectacular athletes, but they're also going to have some issues from a technique and a fundamental standpoint. I think we just saw Carson Wentz. I mean, that defines his legacy in Philadelphia. Just how poor fundamentally and poor mechanically he was, and really slid, if anything, from his second season when John DeFilippo was here. I think he's a good poster child for this.
How do the players feel about this, John? And listen, it's going to help their pockets, so overall I'm sure they're happy, but they also have to realize, man, the season's already a grind. Now let's play another game. I mean, do they really care? It's overall happy because of more money. What do you think the feel is?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to love the money. They're going to love the spikes in the TV deal, the spikes in the salary cap, the spikes in the contracts. Every one of them says they don't want to play 17 games. But I think that's kind of indoctrinated in them to be against that. You know, way back, they played 12 games in the NFL, and they went to 14, and it went to 16. At some point, you would think they would have to stop it. You know, and Roger Goodell said it again today, and I laughed out loud, and I chuckled again. I'm thinking about it. He said, we're following the science. I mean, I don't – you can't talk about safety and talk about raising games. I mean, I've argued you can't talk about safety. You're a hypocrite to talk about safety in the NFL to begin with, because it's not safe to play professional football. So even the people out there on Twitter that say this is horrible, the NFL doesn't care about their players, well, they don't. They're right. It is about the money, but you don't care about the players either, because you enjoy watching them play football, and playing football, one game, forget about 17 games, it's not good for them. Let's be honest about that.
No, absolutely. Just not. I mean, hypocrites are all over social media and online from the fans, as you and I know very well, John. Quickly, just another headline update for the league. Now, I don't know how much we can speak to this. The headline really could say it all, but NFL expects full stadiums for the 2021 season. That's from the commish as well. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, they felt that way for a while behind the scenes, and it came out and said it today, and that's the goal. That was the goal last year, though. I mean, it's kind of out of their hands, and it depends on local government more than anything else, and they have to abide by that. So, say locally, if the city of Philadelphia says the Eagles can only have 1/3 capacity, that's it. I mean, but the league as a whole wants full stadiums, and I think they're hopeful by the way things are going that they'll get to that point. But the problem is for the league, you know, certain places are going to get there. I mean, Florida's already open. Technically, although nobody has done it, although UFC was the first. I don't know. Did they do it? What was that card this week? You know, Ryan? Was that the one in Jacksonville this weekend?
I want to say Jacksonville. It's usually one of two locations, but I'm pretty sure Florida. I'll double check.
They just sold. I don't know if it was the one that happened over the weekend, but they're planning on having a full arena. And I don't know if that's the one that just happened or it's coming up. I'll have to check on that, but. They'll be the first sort of major sport to have a full arena. So Florida's already allowing that. Now, nobody has taken advantage of it to this point except them. But you can see, you know, Texas, it really comes down to politics, and politics are terrible and awful. And look at California. I mean, California still has, you know, pretty severe lockdowns compared to most of the rest of the country, and that's where the Super Bowl is next year. So if California says, no, you can't have a full stadium for the Super Bowl. Well, you either got to go somewhere else or you got to put as many fans as they allow. So it depends, and it always depends on the local governments.
The fight this weekend was actually in Las Vegas, John. So
yeah, so that's not the one, but they have one that they've already started selling tickets for in Jacksonville, I believe, where they're going to fill it up. They're selling every ticket. I think it's already sold out.
Wow.
And they'll be the first major sports organization to fill a stadium since the pandemic.
Talking with John McMullen, our NFL Eagles insider. We do this every night at 7:30 on The Fix. Follow John at JF McMullen. PhillyVoice.com and SI.com is where you can find all of his written work. And speaking of that, I know you had an article yesterday, John, and we start this conversation talking pro days. Justin Fields stole the headlines today. There's a big pro day tomorrow that could impact the Eagles a little bit, and you wrote about it?
Well, I think a lot of them have, really come off the board. A couple of, major, whether it's, we talked about Alabama having the two, Miami was today, Notre Dame is tomorrow. And these are all schools that have major league talent. And they all have potential options sort of at number 12 overall. Now that the Eagles have kind of fallen down. And it's actually interesting. I don't know if you're talking about the Notre Dame story I wrote today. I wrote a story about Gregory Rousseau, who's the edge rusher from Miami. And he's kind of like shooting up the board. And to the point where I know we've talked about that no edge rushers are sort of good enough to go in the top 10. Well, he might go in the top 10 now. And that's how things are shifting. And again, it's not necessarily, I always say, it's not necessarily prospects shooting up the board. It's people learning that the NFL really likes these guys. And Russo is one of those guys that I look at for the Eagles because I did a deep dive and I mentioned on the show about who they've picked when they're in the top half of the draft. So 16 or above over the past 20-plus years since Andy Reid got here. And it's quarterback, offensive line, or defensive line. Literally nothing else. Nothing else. Not even one outlier. It's always been quarterback, offensive line, or defensive line. If they're in the top 16 picks of the draft, they have taken nothing else. So I think, there is some newness to this organization with a new coaching staff, obviously. But the power center, the centers of power, it's the same people. It's Jeffrey Lurie, it's Howie Roseman, it's Andy Weidel. And that's what they believe in. So and I put cornerback as a little bit of an outlier only because if you go back to when Andy Reid was interviewed, he said, give me 2 tackles, give me 2 edge rushers, a quarterback, and 2 corners. And I mentioned that yesterday on the show as well. So they do value that position. They just haven't been in the spot where they think there's a player. And there could be this time with J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain and Caleb Farley. So there could be a corner. But, boy, I'm starting to look at Russo and say, that's an Eagles pick. That's an Eagles pick at 12.
What are the chances now? I mean, this could be a dumb question, but the chances of the Eagles just going offensive lineman at 12, why wouldn't they go offensive lineman at 12?
Yeah, I mean, they could. That's another position. I've shied away from that because they're not bad on the offensive line, but they're also aging. We constantly talk about Jason Kelsey. Nobody knew if he was coming back this year. Brandon Brooks coming off a second Achilles tear in essentially 3 years. So you have to worry about that. You have to worry about Lane Johnson coming off serious ankle surgery at his age. So you do have to start to turn it over. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the Eagles took an offensive lineman, somebody like Rashawn Slater fell to 12, or Barrett Tucker from USC is at 12. It wouldn't surprise me at all, because that's it's going to be offensive or defensive line. I'm confident in that. It's going to upset people. And what's really going to upset people is that Chase and Pitts, it's looking like they're going to be there at 6, both of them. So the Eagles could have had their choice if that happens, and people are going to be really upset about that.
Oh yeah, it's gonna get ugly real quick. Last one here for you, John. Like, when you're picking 12th overall and there's an offensive lineman and a cornerback who are both at the same level for their position, like both an A- and 90 overall out of 100. Do they factor in, okay, well, there's going to be a really good offensive lineman still available at 37, so we will go corner because of that? Like, how does all that play into things when you're selecting on draft day?
Yeah, generally you can't do that if you have a player you like at 12. Generally, when you move down, it's because you basically say have 6 or 7 players that are graded pretty equally, and you feel comfortable that the talent level is the same, so you're willing to drop back a little bit. But you're not going to say, if you like an offensive lineman and say he's clearly the best player at 12, you're not going to say, let's skip him because Liam Eichenberg, he's one of those Notre Dame kids I wrote about, is going to be available at 37. I don't think you can play those types of games. So when you talk about moving down, you're generally talking about you're really, really comfortable that a certain sort of cluster of players are pretty the same from a grade standpoint. You'd be comfortable taking any of them. And that's generally how trades happen. And, not to say teams won't do that. Bad teams will certainly do that and say, well, we like this kid on the offensive line, but we really need a cornerback. So let's take the cornerback, and there's still going to be some good offensive linemen down at 37. But I certainly teams do that, but they generally are bad teams.
All right, so let's hope the Eagles don't go about it that way. Johnny Mack, our NFL Eagles insider, every night at 7:30. Follow him at JF McMullen, PhillyVoice.com.
And by the way, before I go, Ryan,
yeah.
UFC 261, April 24th in Jacksonville, sold out in 4 minutes. It'll be a full house.
Huh. When is that?
April 24th.
April 24th. Okay, sorry, I missed that. There you go. Dropping knowledge for the UFC dates as well. Listen to him host Extending the Play every Saturday at 10 a.m. right here on 1490 and Birds 365 starting next week with J Mac and Joe Mac, if that works. All right, John, we'll do it again tomorrow.
All right, thanks, Ryan.
Yep. There he is, Johnny Mac.
Football in Philadelphia is a lifestyle, a passion from birth, and a personal responsibility to know the game. Boo when necessary. And think about EATLES, Eagles! Every second of every minute of every hour of every day. Birds 365 was created for you. Jody Mack, the legendary sports talker, joins forces with NFL insider John McMullen. Birds 365. Start your morning with Johnny Mack and Jody Mack across the JAKIB Media Network. Watch it live on YouTube.